the end of February already, but this show is taking no breaks. College football is taking no breaks. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show, Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, last one on the face of the planet. I went to the Twitter sphere, asked y'all for some takes that you are willing to die on the hill for, and y'all answered in elite fashion as you always do. But I want us to start here. How can we fix the college football playoff? Because we all agree, it's imperfect right now. It's okay for it to be imperfect. It's not okay for it to stay imperfect, all right? We're not all right with things just staying mediocre. Now, the college football playoff is going to change in 2026. So powers that be, if you are looking for a format that's going to work, look no further. We're about to put you on some game. What are the problems to address for the college football playoff? To me, there's a couple of them. If I could give you like the perfect world scenario, do a genie back in the bottle type thing, I'd go to 4 to 6 teams, so I'd reduce the field, but I'm going to go ahead and assume we can't do that. So with that being said, my objections are auto bids, which we'll cover. The seeding in itself makes less than no sense. The committee is good. I think we probably could strive for better. The home field in college football needs to matter more and be a bigger factor in the playoff. And also, let's be real, this season itself probably goes a little bit too long. Okay, now this is coming from someone who is blessed enough to cover college football for a living. I mean, it's just the most hilarious job in the world. I'm sitting here telling you, for the betterment of the sport, we got to find a way not to have less games, but we have to find a way to maybe pick up the pace of play here for a second. Now, let's start with auto bids, because this is something I've been just screaming from the top of the rooftops to anybody that will listen. Auto bids make no sense. They make no sense. Auto bids might make sense for your NFL playoff. It might make sense for the NBA. In college football, where you have over 100 teams and you have over 50 teams in the Power Four, auto bids don't make sense. And hear me clearly, this is not an SEC/Big Ten opinion. This is for the ACC. This is for the Big 12. This is just me speaking for college football here. The rebuttal that I'll hear from this pretty quickly is, but JD, the NFL, it's how it works. It's football. I'm cool. I don't have any issue with the NFL. But I'm speaking on behalf of college football. I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, and there are years where the NFC South, to keep it a buck, does not deserve to have a team in the playoff. That's not me telling you that I don't want to see the Falcons in the dance and find a way to exercise those 28-3 demons, but the point remains, it should have some subjectivity to it. We should be able to use our brains and deduce who the top teams are in college football. And if that's a situation where we have 4 teams from the Big 12 making the playoff, so be it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume here that as we move into the next evolution of the college football playoff, we're going to be somewhere between 14 and 16 teams. I have seceded that. That is not a part of my proposal to y'all today on how we're going to fix the playoff. But with that being said, why in the world would we assign a certain number of spots to a conference that may or may not be in a good spot every given year? Now, I understand the SEC and the Big Ten, they're holding a lot of cards here. It sounds like they're going to get 4 bids apiece, but that doesn't even make a lot of sense to me either. Like, if I'm the SEC or the Big Ten and I'm surrendering a bunch of spots from an auto bids perspective so I can have more auto bids, I think you're limiting yourself. Think about it this way. If we're doing 14 teams in the college football playoff, let's count them up. 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten. That's 8. The way it sounds right now is you're going to get 2 bids for the Big 12, 2 bids for the ACC. Okay, we're at 12. I'm going to go ahead and just assume one of those bids is also going to go to the highest ranked G5 champ. We're at 13. Y'all, if we're at 14 teams, you got 1 at-large spot, and I believe the way it's worded right now that Notre Dame is protected, quote-unquote, to where if they rank in the top 14 at the end of the season, they get a playoff spot. We don't need to have a committee at that point. Now, I'm not here going to bat for the committee. Committee we'll get to here in a second. But the point I'm trying to make here is there may not be a year where there are 4 Big Ten teams that deserve a spot. There might not be a year where we have 4 SEC teams that deserve a spot. I would love for us to do no auto bids. Let's have a committee, which I'll talk about here in just a matter of moments, and let's use our brains. Let's look at what's happening on the field and then put the best field together from what we see on Saturdays. That's my take here, all right? So, speaking of the committee, I like you. I don't know that I love you, all right? I think we need to maybe just send out some pink slips to everyone involved and say, hey, it's not a you thing, it's an us thing. We got to find a way to get better. If we want you on the committee going forward, we'll call you. My thing is, I want more students of college football making decisions for college football. Now, that's not me telling you that Ward Manuel can't still have a spot on the committee. Maybe he ends up going through our interview process and he ends up getting a job on the committee. But for me, like, I want more coaches. I want more players that have played more recently and coaches that have coached more recently. Like, I want Nick Saban on the committee. I don't think he has a pretty good idea as to what's best for college football. I want Joel Klatt on the committee. I want Kirk Herbstreit on the committee. I want Andrew Luck on the committee, to be real with you. I want David Shaw on the committee. Put some brains there from our friends out there on the farm in Palo Alto, California. People are going to push back and say, well, JD, you want Saban in the committee? Like, I get it. He's the greatest coach of all time, but isn't there some SEC bias baked in there? Probably not more biased than an athletic director who is currently the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee with a team that has a chance to make the playoff in Ward Manuel at Michigan. Like, we got coaches on this thing that haven't coached a game since 2014. And this is not me saying they don't know the sport, but I want people that are embedded in this. I want people that eat, sleep, and breathe this every single day. And people are saying, well, JD, Joel Klatt, and you know, he's got to deal with the Big Ten. Yes, Fox does. But again, if we're having commissioners and athletic directors, a part of this College Football Playoff Committee as it stands, I don't see a reason as to why we can't have a good mix in that room of other people that, like I said, are just embedded all the way to the nth degree of what this sport is. Now, in tandem with that, committee, your watch party here, I don't care if it's on conference title weekend, whenever you do it, we got to switch some things up. Because, what I saw from Heather Denich's Twitter, and we addressed this when it happened, but like what we saw from that watch party that Heather Dinich exposed the entire world to, we got to change up the watch party. We got to change up the vibes. That's mandatory. I don't care who it is. I need appetizers. I need people standing. I need big eyes watching the game. I'd love if somebody looked like they had a parlay going on. I need real like stake in the game here from the committee. We got people sitting back in chairs. I think I see maybe one bubble water. I'm a bubble water guy. Probably the softest thing about me. I don't want my college football playoff chairman sipping on some Perrier LaCroix when I'm watching things go down. That's my opinion. We got to change the vibes. That's mandatory. That goes without saying, all right? But we're going to make sure we say it just so it's out there. So, with that being said, I think that the season goes entirely too long. Not that we played too many games. I never wanted this many games, but neither here nor there. I think we got to change the calendar of this season. If it were me, I'm going to go ahead and alter what conference title weekend looks like, which it sounds like they're going to do anyway. I make that a play-in weekend. So if you want to have the SEC and the Big Ten have, their 3 versus 6 matchup, 4 versus 5 matchup in the conference, so be it. But I want that happening, still when it happens, it's December 7th, but I want the round 1 game for the college football playoff on December 14th. So a week later, give or take. I know the calendar changes every year in terms of when this would happen, but roughly December 14th, so that second weekend. Round 2, I want the following weekend, so December 20th, 21st-ish. Round 3, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and then the national title game played when it's been traditionally played, like right around January 10th, January 8th-ish, kind of in that window. Why is this important? Because, I think we lose momentum as a sport. And this isn't me saying I didn't still enjoy the heck out of what the college football playoff was, and that national title was awesome. Being there was incredible. But a lot of people have already turned the page on what the season is by the time we play the final game of the season. Like the majority of fan bases, either one, aren't interested because their team's not playing, or two, they already have other things going on within their own building that they have to stay dialed on or get intel on or whatever. Like winter conditioning is happening January 20th. I think I saw that the 2027 national title game is scheduled for January 27th. We're almost into February. That's way too long. We don't need to have this kind of a runway for us to finish a college football season. And I think very quietly, some college football coaches would be in favor of this because you're coaching at that point then a college football season. You're not having to keep your team dialed in for the entirety of what this potential calendar would look like going from late August to darn near early February. The other part of this too, I think that if you are trying to keep momentum week in and week out, I know we only have a 1-year sample size, but no team that got a bye in the college football playoff last year won their game. Now, they all have extenuating circumstances. I'm not saying a bye isn't still a good thing to have, but I do think there's a very real thing to staying in rhythm, being hot, continuing to play games. Like ask Ohio State if they wanted a bye. Now, I'm sure they would have taken a bye, but you hear what I'm saying. I don't know that we see that same Ohio State monster if they have a couple weeks to kick back and get off their feet and maybe lose their momentum. So that's what I want to see. Now, some of you are going to push back and say, well, JD, that's a lot on these kids, man. That's a bit on the body. Again, I never wanted this many games. But if we're going to play this many games, let's do it in an expedited fashion. And that could be another part of the game is, well, you better hire a good strength staff. You better have good recovery. That's another part of what college football is now, is the sports side. So that could make them being college football in general, have even more investment in that department. Again, that sounds kind of cold-hearted, but if it were me, we'd play way less games anyway. So that's a problem that, unfortunately, we now have ourselves in the new world of college football. Got a lot of fixes here, a couple more. The seeding model is absolute trash. Hot garbage. Wet dog hair. Makes no sense. Now, it's going to change because we're not the only ones that feel this way, but there should never be a world where playing in your conference title game, win or lose, hurts you. Never should happen. You ask Oregon, them winning the Big Ten, arguably the worst thing that happened to them this past season. I mean, the fact that you had to play Ohio State, your first college football playoff game, is just a travesty. So the solution, I think, is we got a couple options here, depending on how saucy we want to get. The first option feels like the most straightforward. Let's just reseed after each round to ensure that the top seed in the college football playoff gets to play the, call a spade here, the worst team in the college football playoff. That would make sense. Option 2, though, is where we can have some fun with this. If we want to get real nuanced, how about we let the teams that are the higher seeds that have a bye elect who they want to play? Let's have a draft. Let's make it a TV product. Now, I don't need a head coach jumping on the mic on ESPN and saying, hey, we want X team. Hey, Ohio State, we'll see y'all in the Rose Bowl. I don't think we need to have that whole conversation, but I'd be down for a little Reese Davis, read off the card. The Oregon Ducks have elected to play Boise State. The Oregon Ducks have elected to play Arizona State. I'd be here for it. And I think when you talk about the money that would make, I know that kind of spins this whole world we're living in, whether we like it or not. I would be all about that. I'll tell you this too, if we have that model a year ago, I don't know anybody in their right mind that is electing to play Ohio State or Notre Dame. Food for thought. Last thing here, home field's got to be flexed. Now, I did some work on this, getting ready for this segment, obviously, as you would hope someone who's doing a college football show would do. And I got to thinking, man, I feel like home field for us is kind of a natural resource. Like what college football is and why it's so special is because of the environment we have on Saturdays. We've talked about this before a lot, but the bands, the traditions, the pageantry, the venues, all those things, to me, that's the one thing that I would point to that is still good and right and true and pure to the nth degree of what college football is. Let's flex that. Let's make that the landing page for new viewers that decide to stumble into the college football viewing world during the playoff. And so I actually went in, I Googled Arizona's tourism website, not the University of, just like the state of Arizona. And wouldn't you know it, the landing page for them, their greatest natural resource. The banner, big banner, the Grand Canyon. Come visit Arizona, come see the Grand Canyon. I want a big banner. Watch college football. Home field is awesome. Watch a Penn State wideout. Watch Death Valley at night. That's what I want to see. So I think that would be a lot of fun. And also, too, I think in terms of how this would look, I'd like to have home field all the way up until the semis. So you would add, if we're going to talk this through practically, in the 12-team format, you would have 2 rounds of home field for the college football playoff. Obviously, that would expand as we go to more teams. But I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that, again, accentuates everything that's good and right and true about college football. And I think that's something that we can, again, just kind of have be the landing page for the folks that stumble into this sport. So hit me with your ideas, your resolutions, the ways that we can fix college football as a whole. We're going to go ahead and fix the playoff today and maybe the portal, maybe spring games, maybe something else in the future. But get at us with your solutions as to how you would fix the college football playoff. Hey, thanks for everyone tuned in right now. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel. Like I said, the content is just, it's full speed ahead, baby. Full speed ahead. And this is, I've said this a couple times, but I'll say it again. This is a fun part of the year because a lot of our industry has decided to maybe take a step back a little bit in terms of how much content they produce. And this is not a stab at them at all. This is a fun time for us to say, hey, if you are truly a college football sicko, we're not taking any steps back. We're actually just moving even further into this space and trying to find everything we can to talk about with this sport. And a lot of that is talking to y'all. So make sure, again, you've subscribed and make sure you are following on all the social platforms so we can hear from y'all and have a good time there. So we're going to do this for every conference across college football, but we're going to go ahead and project the top 10 quarterbacks in each conference. Now, notice, projecting versus current ranking is going to be different. We already have a current ranking out for the top 10 quarterbacks in the sport that were starters a year ago. This is different. Not only is it conference specific, it's also a projection to what we think this looks like at the end of the season. Okay, so with that being said, let's go 10 up to 1 here, the top 10 quarterbacks in the SEC. I'm going to go ahead and project Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt, sitting at number 10. Now, the numbers for him are not going to be crazy when you look at his stats. He may not throw for the most yards or score the most touchdowns, but what he is to Vanderbilt within that system, there is no way to overstate that. I'll also say this. He came by the studios in Nashville here not that long ago, and he said something to the effect of he was going to try to win the Heisman Trophy. Dude's a dog. Diego Pavia, to me, strikes me as a guy who's got a screw loose in a good way. And when I visited Cornell for the first time on an unofficial visit, I had a host, and the host told me, he's like, hey, man, everybody here is pretty nice, but us as our team, like we don't really mess with the wrestlers because they're pretty crazy. Not bad dudes, but like we make sure we steer clear. We don't get in their way. They're crazy. I feel the same way about Diego Pavia. I'm not betting against him. Dude's crazy. He's at number 10, and I think he makes some noise again this year, much like last year in the SEC. Now, at number 9, again, projection, but Georgia's Gunnar Stockton, this could change after the spring game if we get a chance to watch their spring game, if, they follow through on the broadcast and all that stuff. I am fully prepared to take him off the list or put him much higher based on what we see. But doesn't he just seem like if you put in, hey, ChatGPT, what is like the model for a Georgia football player look like? Like what's the story arc for them? I think that the model would spit out something like Gunnar Stockton. He is an AI Georgia player to me. Top 10 player at his position when he came out of high school. Waits his turn, doesn't play for a while, probably gets some scout team reps, plays his role when he's called upon, comes up big, and the SEC title game, Georgia wins the SEC because of how he played in the second half, and he threw for the most yards against Notre Dame than anybody else in the college football playoff. Now, was he perfect? No, but there was enough there for me to get excited about. There was enough there for me to feel like if he had more weapons around him in his Mike Bubble offense, he could be successful. Again, threw for more yards than Drew Aller from Penn State and Will Howard from Ohio State last year against that real deal Notre Dame defense. So Gunnar Stockton from Georgia for me, pending him winning the job, he is number 9 on this list. Now, number 8, a cat that we haven't seen a lot of, similar to Gunnar Stockton, Ole Miss's Austin Simmons. Now, for me, the thing with him is I like all the clues, dude. Like, a guy who was hand-selected by Lane Kiffin to be his quarterback, had a Mona Lisa of a drive against Georgia when Jackson Dart goes in the tent, got the baseball background. You can't totally see the full picture just yet because none of us can. We haven't seen the dude play college football in a real, large sample size. But I like all the clues, and I also, we'll just call a spade here, I like a Lane Kiffin offense for any quarterback. So I think he'll have success. He's number 8 on this list for me, projecting to 2025. Number 7, this is a guy with top 3 ability, but Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee is who I'm putting at 7 as it stands right now. I want to see it, dude. How many times did Cato and I get in here during the week and talk about wanting to see Tennessee connect on some vertical passing game? I love the run game. I love the defense. But like Nico Iamaleava, they're going to ask a lot more of him next year because I don't think you have the same run game. I don't think you have the same defense. Not that it won't still be good, but I think it will have to be a lot more quarterback driven. The tough thing with trying to evaluate Nico is the potential, and what he is always how you're trying to, bridge the gap. Like in some ways we grade Nico against his potential, which is that fair? Not totally. Is it the reality? I think so. The other part of this is we've also seen what quarterbacks can be in the Josh Heupel offense. Like Hendon Hooker, in some ways, totally distorted our view of what Nico Iamaleava was supposed to be at Tennessee with all the hype he came in with. So I love the ability. I want to see it a little more. I have to project a little more, but I want to see it, and I think there's enough juice there for him to shoot up this list as time progresses. At number 6, I got Marcel Reed from A&M. I think this is a dude who could boom into the top 3, to be real with y'all. I think he's that good. He, just like we said with Diego Pavia, Marcel Reed just got some psycho to him. Talk about Cam Ward and the way that he walked out against Florida and just had what seemingly ice water in his blood and was out there playing pickup. That was the same thing I saw from Marcel Reed when he got tapped in against Florida. Like, it was moments before kickoff, and we're all like, oh, hey, actually, Connor Wegman's not playing. This is dude who's like a redshirt freshman, and Marcel Reed went out and got buckets. He also now has a full offseason where Colin Klein, I believe, is going to fully tailor the offense to him. You sprinkle in some more weapons. Dude can spin it now. Just because he's mobile doesn't mean he can't throw the football downfield. You go watch that Auburn tape, he's dropping dimes. So Marcel Reed, to me, I'm going to go ahead and project him at 6. Would not be surprised if he finishes a lot higher when it's all said and done. Now, at number 5, we'll talk about this guy a little bit later in the show as well, but Arch Manning, you got to do something with him. 5 feels like the right place to put him. I love the floor for him. I love what's around him. I don't think he's going to crash the car that is Texas football. Reason why I feel that way, he got 2 years to watch somebody else drive it, and now he has arguably the greatest play caller in the sport in Steve Sarkisian. The other thing I like for him, I don't think that he is going to be just totally leaned on from the jump. Now, big game against Ohio State early, so Arch better eat your Wheaties, baby. But I think they're going to share the load with him a little bit in the sense that they're going to run the football. They're going to do, I think, a lot of RPO stuff to try and get defenses off balance. I like the fit a lot. I like the ability. I like what we've seen. And I think he's a top 5 guy when it's all said and done in the SEC this season. DJ Lagway from Florida, for me, is at 4. He's shown us more than an Arch Manning to this point, so that's why I have him there. Also, he's played some SEC football. That should not be just looked past. He showed you what he's about last year, being able to take over with Graham Mertz going down. Y'all, Florida hasn't had a guy like him at quarterback since Tim Tebow. And that sounds big to say, but that's genuinely how I feel. He's legitimately a game changer to the point where if you're a Florida fan, you're allowed to, for the first time in a minute, talk about competing for the SEC championship. Now, I'm not predicting that right now, but if you were to tell me that were to happen, I wouldn't be all that shocked by it because of who DJ Lagway is, because of his skill set, because of the fact that he elevates everyone around him. Finished the year 6-1 as a starter. Now, I get it. You missed the Texas game. The one loss, though, was against Georgia where, let's face it, they kind of had Georgia on the ropes. So I love everything about DJ Lagway. Love the way he's wired. Love the fact that they have some pieces coming back for him in Gainesville. I got him at 4 heading into next year when it comes to our projection for the end of the season. Now, at number 3, Oklahoma's John Mateer. He might be college football's best-kept secret, y'all, to be real, because he played at Washington State. Not a lot of people got to watch his games. You kind of know the name because he's that Oklahoma transfer, and he goes over with his OC. To me, he is everything that Oklahoma has been missing offensively. Playmaker, juice, ad-lib, all those things. Like, what he brings, I think he's not going to miss a beat in Norman, Oklahoma. Now, the competition will be better, but Ben Arbuckle, his offensive coordinator, John Kuzieski, his quarterback coach, both in Norman right now, he's not playing catch-up at all. He doesn't have to hit the reset like you see other transfer quarterbacks have to do. Love the ability, love the playmaker, like I just said. I think he balls out next season for Oklahoma, and I think Oklahoma is going to be in good shape because of who they have at quarterback. So I got him at number 3 heading into next season. At number 2, Garrett Nussmeier is the most sure thing in the league. If you had him at 1, I wouldn't push back too much, to be real. Like, he threw for over 4,000 yards last year, but the thing that I love about him going into 25 is none of this is new to him anymore. Like, it wasn't new to him a season ago because he had been around college football and prepared like the starter and all that good stuff, but it's impossible to replicate what it is walking into a game in early November against Alabama when it's a home game and there's playoff implications. There's no way to replicate that kind of juice. Now, when that happens again for Garrett Nussmeier, whatever game they're walking into, there's going to be a sense of, I think, different poise that he has from having taken the lumps a season ago. And taking the lumps is putting it maybe a little bit too harshly. Again, over 4,000 yards, 525 attempts, had no run game behind him, gets better weapons, another year as the guy, another year in the system. Garrett Nussmeier, I'd buy all the stock that I could find at this point in time. A big reason why we're high on LSU on the show. Big reason why we think they make the playoff. Now, if we're talking about buying stock, I think it's impossible for me to have bought more stock in any player in college football going into a season than Lenore Sellers. So, y'all, we're swinging big here. Like, a lot of people will try and, walk the line and ride the fence in the offseason, and we'll do some of that, but we're not doing that here. The physical traits, the special playmaking ability, What he did at the end of last season, I'm all in on Lenore Sellers. Truly, I think he is that good. I think he is that good, and I think he's going to be the best quarterback in college football next year. I think he is going to be in contention for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he will carry South Carolina to the college football playoff. That's how we feel. So to recap it here, projecting these quarterbacks, again, this is assuming now we have the time machine, look up at the end of November, the regular season. The top 10 quarterbacks in the SEC will be as follows. Diego Pavia at 10, Gunnar Stockton from Georgia at 9, assuming he wins the job. Austin Simmons at 8, Nico Imaliava at 7, Marcel Reed at 6, Arch Manning at 5, DJ Lagway at 4, Jonathan Matier at Oklahoma at number 3, Garrett Nussmeier at 2, and Lenora Sellers at number 1. Those are our pre-spring now projections. We may have to revisit those after the spring, but that's how we feel right now, and we'll stand on business with those. All right? Now, Cato and I were talking before, man. Cato's a Nuss guy, and I'm glad that one of us is taking Nuss as number 1. Cato, Nuss number 1 for you probably? Yeah, number 1. That's a good bet, man. That's not a bad bet by any stretch of the imagination. Also, quick little Easter egg here. If you are not subscribed to the podcast feed, I would do that. Some extra content on there that is worth your while. That's all I'll say. Go ahead and subscribe there. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get them. Hard Count with JD PicKell. You can find us there. So I mentioned Arch Manning. I think he's going to be great next year. But Pete Nako sat down with Paul Feinbaum, and they had a really interesting discussion about the hype for Arch Manning and the future for him. And Paul Feinbaum made an interesting comparison of the hype of Tim Tebow to what Arch Manning is dealing with right now. And one of you hit me with a take, and your take of your college football take that is the hill you're dying on, rather, is that you think that Arch Manning is going to be as good as advertised. Spoiler, if Arch Manning is as good as advertised, he is Tim Tebow. Like, the comparisons, too, are pretty obvious. Both number 1 player in their class, both short yardage packages early in their career, both ridiculous hype before even getting the job. The thing with Tebow mania is even when he was getting reps at Florida and he had the goal line package and stuff like that, he did that while Florida won a national title. Like, the expectation for Arch Manning, and why I think the Arch Manning hype actually will be even greater than Tim Tebow's hype in his era that was what it was in college football, is because Texas is at this point where right on the doorstep, man. Hey, for those of y'all on podcast, they're knocking on the door. They're right there. Made the semis the last 2 years. And the question and the thought for Texas fans is, okay, if Arch Manning is who we think he is, with this roster, with Steve Sarkisian, we should win a national championship. And I'd love to sit here and tell you I think you're crazy and that shouldn't be an expectation. We don't know what Archer's going to be. But as we sit here right now, as we just kind of mentioned with that logic, like, that checks out to me. Now, I'm not saying that I would predict that. I wouldn't say that I would co-sign that. But I don't think that you're on this lunatic fringe if that's how you're viewing Arch Manning's career at Texas. Now, I'd also say that we need to be careful of wandering too far down the hype train tracks. Because I promise you, if Arch Manning goes out and they beat Ohio State early in the season, the first take segment that you're going to see, this is no disrespect to the first take, good stuff over there. But the first take segment you'll see on ESPN is Arch Manning the greatest Manning of all time? Like, the bar has been set for him since he probably could hold a football at Peyton Manning level, at Eli Manning level, having won 2 super. Like, you see what I'm saying here? Like, the hype for him has been there his entire life. And so the thing that I appreciate about Arch Manning, and this is not saying anything less of Tim Tebow, but like, Arch Manning has known what he's signed up for by playing quarterback. Like, he always understood. You don't think he's ever shown up to a social gathering, a high school dance, a basketball practice, a rec league football game, and there's not been someone whispering and pointing and saying, hey, that's Peyton Manning's nephew. Like, look at the back of his jersey, Manning. Does it sound familiar? Like, he's used to this. He's used to this. So while the hype is enormous, and I don't think the hype is altogether that misplaced, I think the guy's built for it. So that's what I appreciate. I also think we need to be pretty careful on how this narrative is remixed around him. Like, I mean, I appreciate the way that Lil Wayne jumps on it. Feels like every single remix. There will be Lil Wayne level of remixes around Arch Manning throughout the course of this season. So I would say to you, whether you're a Texas fan or whether you're a college football fan, let's stay the course. Let's stay the course. Not everything needs to have a take. Marcus Aurelius essentially said that. One of the greatest gifts in life is having no opinion. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. Let's be okay with having no opinion on Arch Manning for the better part of the first few games of his college career. I'm not saying we can't evaluate it and have an emotional response in real time. I mean, by the grace of God, that's what we're paid to do on this show, but we're not going to have definitive takes on Arch Manning's legacy and his career because it's just that's stupid. Can we just let the plot play out for once in our life? Can we just let this guy get a few reps at quarterback and let him start a few games? I know the answer is no, but I'm just asking all of us here to try and, as best we can, keep our head on straight just a little bit as this Arch Manning story arc progresses. And I say that while also just having told you, if you're a Texas fan and your expectation is Arch Manning take us to a national title, that's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable because of who Arch Manning is. A lot of that isn't unreasonable because of where the roster's at. And that's kind of the funny part about Tebow and Arch Manning as you compare the two careers. We're actually, I think, when all the dust settles on this, going to be able to, it feels bizarre to say, but we're going to actually be able to, I think, compare them in pretty decent context. Different eras, totally get that. The expanded playoff versus the BCS era, totally different. But, like, Texas isn't at this point where they're fighting to win 8 games anymore. Like, Texas should probably compete for a national title next year. Whether Quinn Ewers came back or not, like, the roster's in that kind of a spot. And so, as we look at the two careers side by side, you're going to be able to at least have a discussion with your buddy when y'all are chopping it up at your favorite barbecue joint or wherever. So here's some truths to kind of anchor us a little bit here as we're having this discussion about a guy that hasn't actually been officially handed the keys. I say officially handed the keys in the sense that he hasn't actually started game one just yet for Texas. I mean, everybody, even Steve Sarkisian is saying he's going to be the guy. But the February truths here are that Arch, I believe, again, I've said this before, he is a better fit for the offense than what you had a year ago. Not dunking on Quinn Ewers, but the mobility of Arch Manning to go with the running back room, to go with what you're trying to replace at wide receiver, to how I think Texas is going to be able to play with that defense, how good they are, and trying to complement them with what Arch Manning is on offense. I think he's a better fit in that regard. Cato made a great point. We're chopping it up before this show. When was the last time that Sark had like a dual threat guy at quarterback? Cato said Jake Locker. I don't know if he's all that incorrect with what he was at Washington. I do know this, though. Steve Sarkisian having more weapons in his offense, having another guy that can hurt you, now at quarterback, like that is going to be a good thing. There's no way that's ever a net negative. So that's another truth. The roster is at a point where you are able to, like I just mentioned, have enough around Arch Manning to where you don't need to lean on him 110%. It will not be the Arch Manning show, I don't anticipate at least, from the jump in Austin. And if it is, that should tell you everything you need to know about how good Arch Manning is and how good Steve Sarkisian believes he is. I said we don't have to have a take, but here's my take on this. Without seeing the guy take a snap in 2025, I think he'll be, from a career perspective, when it's all said and done, closer to Tim Tebow than what Case McCoy was. Not knocking Case McCoy, but I would be wildly surprised if we sat here in a few months, in a few years, and said, man, I guess Arch Manning just wasn't all that. I don't think that's the case. I think he's really good. I think Texas will have a ton of success with him, and I think that his career will be unlike anything we've seen in college football, including Tim Tebow's, when it comes to the hype. So, buckle up, baby. I mean, I was thinking about this too, because SEC Media Days this year is in Atlanta. No shot Texas doesn't send Arch, right? Like there's no way, dude. There's no way. And I've seen the documentaries of like Johnny Manziel showing up for Media Days. You see old YouTube clips of Tebow showing up for Media Days. I'm like, bro, that was in the era where Twitter was like just kind of getting off the ground. Like having a podcast wasn't even a thing. We're gonna be sitting here trying to talk to Arch Manning, and we're gonna be like at like a Atlanta airport Chick-fil-A line. Like it's gonna be deep, dude. So I'm excited for that. But that's all that's to say is if we can get an Arch Manning interview for you at Media Days, we will do our very best. But it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be very, very wild. Speaking of quarterbacks, Notre Dame will not have Riley Leonard starting at quarterback for them next season. So that begs the question, who's it going to be? There is 3 names to keep a pulse on. C.J. Carr, Steve Angeli, known as Steve Peanut Butter Angeli around the studio, and Kenny Minchie. We'll break this down, give you our prediction. Before we do that, though, make sure you are subscribed to the On 3 YouTube channel. If you're watching right now in the full hour-long episode, hey, thank you. You're a real one. Just keep doing what you're doing. If you haven't yet subscribed, no time about the present. Love to have you a part of this. We will be breaking down all things spring game while they exist for Notre Dame. We'll be breaking down all things college football as long as our key card keeps working to get into the studio. So, as I was saying, those are the 3 names to keep a pulse on. In terms of how the offense is going to look, I really do think that it's going to be a lot more of a vertical offense. Like a lot more of what Mike Denbrock, I think, wanted to do at LSU with Jaden Daniels. Obviously, you don't have Jaden Daniels playing quarterback for you next year in South Bend, but you do have some weapons in a Jaden Greathouse, in a Jordan Faison. And I got to thinking, as the confetti dropped in Atlanta and we're out there on the field post-game kind of watching it all happen, and Notre Dame came up short, Jaden Greathouse just went for 100 yards for the second game in a row against arguably the best defense that Ohio State has played to that point in the year with Penn State and Ohio State. He's back. Jordan Faison, what he did against Indiana. I can't help but thinking, I'm like, man, I don't know that they maybe have better weapons than we all were even aware of. And you dance with the one that brung you. Like Riley Leonard designed quarterback run on 3rd and short is as good as gold, so I don't fault them for that. But I wonder a little bit, with a different caliber passer at quarterback, does Notre Dame have a little bit more explosivity to them? I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just saying that thought crossed my mind. Now, in terms of the battle, I think that Kenny Minchey is probably the most forgotten in this whole battle. And some of that is a lower profile recruitment and how much juice has been around CJ Carr and all that. Like, I don't know if he wins the job. He's probably not the guy I'd pick right now. I think he needs a role. Good athlete. If y'all don't know who he is, he's a guy that can hurt you in the quarterback design run game. I would keep that in the bag. I truly would. I don't know that he's the starter, but I think that you would be crazy seeing what Riley Leonard did last year to defenses and having to account for that every single week. Not saying Kenny Minchey's Riley Leonard, but I would at least carry that week in and week out when it comes to a game plan for Mike Denbrock and the Irish. So I think he needs a role. I don't think he's the starter. So if that's the case, Steve Angeli, savvy veteran, versus the young buck, CJ Carr. Should be noted, CJ Carr still getting the wing right, okay? So he's hasn't been throwing all that much throughout the season, but it's a tricky one to break down because there's not really a ton to go off of with CJ Carr. There's some to go off of with Steve Angeli. Obviously the drive against Penn State we'll talk about started, I believe, the Sun Bowl a season ago when Sam Hartman did not play in the bowl game, and Steve Angeli looked good doing that. But I do think, to give us some context here, I think it's going to be a true battle. I don't think anybody is like secretly being handed the keys and we just don't know about it. I think it's a true battle. I think it'll go into the fall. I've asked a lot of people close to Notre Dame who they believe will be the starter, and the experts on this are split. If that gives y'all any other confidence on this not being just a CJ Carr's job and we're just going through the motions, I don't think it's that. I think that genuinely either guy could win the job. I'll also say, when you talk about who's making the decision for you, Mike Denbrock picking his quarterback, dude knows quarterbacks. Okay, so if he's making my call here, as an Irish fan, if it's CJ Carr and Mike Denbrock says that's the best way to go, I have a pretty good amount of confidence that that's the best move for our football team. Same deal if it's Steve Angeli. Now, CJ Carr is the most exciting of this group. I think he's probably the future of Notre Dame football. I think with the 4-star prospect that he was and all that, it's easy to get excited about that. And if he wins the job, like I just said, so be it. If I'm trying to predict the winner, though, of this battle, which we are on this show, I think it's Steve Angeli. And the reason why I say that is you can't account for live bullets. We say it a lot. You can't account for 11 on 11, lights are bright, no non-contact jersey on you. How are you going to perform? And when we talk about Notre Dame in 2025, they're not going to be this like trendy dark horse pick for anybody. Just played for a national title. The standard at Notre Dame is no longer can they compete for a natty, it's can they go win a natty. And give Marcus Freeman all the credit in the world that is now a discussion that the Irish are in, because that wasn't always the case. And so as I say that, I think the mental fortitude and just the overall just cool hand is going to be crucial for whoever ends up being the guy at Notre Dame. This is not me telling you that's not CJ Carr. This is me telling you that I watched Steve Angeli in the biggest game of Notre Dame season to that point, being down about 2 scores against one of the best defenses in college football. Cool hand, drive him down the field, get a field goal before half, all good. If Steve Angeli wasn't built like that, y'all, we would have found out in that moment. We would have found out if Steve Angeli wasn't cut from a different cloth in that drive, okay? Because that was as pressure-packed as it comes. And I know that it wasn't the perfect drive, but it was good enough to get 3 points. And so, again, without a ton of context from a on-the-field prospects for a CJ Carr, and with what I think Kenny Minchie's role will be in 2025, I'm going to just call my shot. I think it's Steve Angeli. If it's not, we'll, of course, revisit it, and we'll talk through the offense regardless of whoever's going to be the guy pulling the trigger for them in the fall. But the cool hand, the experience, that drive, man, I think you need that at Notre Dame, and I think Steve Angeli has that, and that's a big reason why I think he's your guy in 2025. Now, 2025 is going to be a fun season. It's weird because we're already sort of talking about spring practices around the corner. I saw some of our friends over at Gators Online, our Florida on 3 site, putting out spring previews, which is just awesome and gets the juices flowing. So we appreciate everyone just getting fired up for 2025. One of y'all shot off a take, though, going back to this prompt that I put out on my Twitter page. I said, hey, give me a college football take that is the hill you are willing to die on. And Michelle hit us up. She says, Ohio State is going to look a lot like Michigan did in 2024 with all their replacing and all their rebuilding. So, okay, it's a take for sure, but it doesn't stop there. She says Michigan takes a huge step forward on offense. Again, I can get behind that. Bryce Underwood probably going to be the guy for you. I don't think that's irresponsible. New OC and Chip Lindsey, I'm here for it. Michigan wins the game for the 5th straight time. Mic drop. For all y'all wondering what the line is on that game. As of right now, Ohio State currently favored by 5.5 against Michigan. Y'all, if Michigan wins for the 5th time in a row, could they really do that? With a freshman quarterback potentially? Like, she makes some valid points with what Ohio State's losing. Let's kind of compare both situations, though. Michigan, coming off a national title in 2023, they were 128 out of 134 in returning production. 36% was back. On top of that, new head coach. Okay, so there was a total reset for Michigan from 23 to 24. Now, for Ohio State, you lose a lot. I don't know what the returning production numbers will be for them. Have a hard time believing it's going to be 36% overall, but still, I don't think it'll be all that great. You're going to have a new quarterback. You're going to have new cats in the backfield toting the rock for you. You lose one of the most productive wide receivers ever. You lose your offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. You lose defensive linemen. Like, you hear the gist of what I'm saying. Ohio State loses a ton. To me, though, there's a bit of a difference in what Michigan was post-Natty and what Ohio State is post-Natty. One is the obvious of, well, Ohio State still has their head coach. Whatever you think about Ryan Day, you just make sure you mention dude won a national title, okay? So 70-10, I think he's a top 2 coach in the sport, and he's still your guy. So in that sense, not a total reset when it comes to practice structure and what the meetings feel like and all those things. Yes, different coaches on the staff for sure, but your head coach is the same. So at the top, not a total reset. More importantly, Ohio State has just recruited, and this is not a knock on Michigan, but like they've recruited at a much higher level than Michigan. And Michigan's going to, I think, get in that game a lot more here under Sharon Moore. But looking at what they were post-national title, like Michigan had one top 10 class between 2021 and 2024, and they were number 9 in 2022. By comparison, Ohio State hasn't finished outside the top 5 since 2019. So, yes, you lose some pieces, but the dude in the waiting is 5-star Julian Sayin coming in for Will Howard, as opposed to J.J. McCarthy leaves. Is it Alex Orji? Is it Davis Warren? And if it's not Julian Sayin, it's another top 10 quarterback and Lincoln Kienholz in his own respective class. So the gaps that you fill, the talent level overall from a raw ingredients perspective is in a better spot for Ohio State than it was for Michigan. Now, I'm saying this, but what I'm saying isn't altogether something that's different from the last couple of seasons either. Like, the roster was superior for Ohio State last year when they met up in Columbus. And what happened? Michigan went out and played a more poised game, played better within the margins, and beat Ohio State physically and on the scoreboard and won the game for the 4th time in a row. So even if Ohio State doesn't have this massive step back, even if they just reset, it's like, well, they're probably not as talented, assuming now, not as talented as what they were a season ago. I know we're in February, we're projecting, but like that's how it feels. Now, Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs are still, I believe, top 2 best players in the sport, so that probably helps things. They were on the team a year ago, too. Michigan still won that game. So can Michigan beat them for the 5th time in a row? That's where this gets really interesting. That was the most gettable Michigan team Ryan Day is going to have as long as Sharon Ward's on the other sideline. No other way around it. There's a total reset. Still some NFL guys, but like the talent will not be the same, I believe, ever again, or as large of a delta between Ohio State and Michigan. Like Ohio State, let's be real here. The defense is really good, but 60 yards and 2 interceptions from your quarterback at Michigan was enough to win the football game. I don't know what Bryce Underwood's going to be. I think he's going to be really good. There's no way to know for sure, but I have to believe he's better than 60-some-odd yards and 2 picks against Ohio State. That'd be my assumption. I don't think that's irresponsible. I think the roster overall is better for Michigan when you talk about what they've done via the portal and things of that nature. Also, it's going to be in Ann Arbor. Got him in Columbus last year. It's going to be at home. I don't think that necessarily favors Ohio State. So for Ohio State, on top of all this, like they're still resetting to some degree. There's still going to be new guys playing different, position. Like Julian Sain I just mentioned. We talked through the defense and how that'll look different. Talked through having to replace your DC with Matt Patricia and your offensive coordinator now is Brian Hartline. There's still going to be a lot that you at least have to account for Ohio State based on what it was a season ago. So let's walk this through. Let's say that this take is incorrect and Ohio State beats Michigan. I know it's the first time in a minute, but they get it done. I know it's going to feel like they should do it for Ohio State fans, but I just think that this would finally remove for Ryan Day the last but for some of the Buckeye fans. Because even with winning a national title, even with being 70-10, even with all of us sitting here and saying, dude's one of the top coaches in the sport. I think there's some folks that are saying he's the best coach in the sport right now. Again, I think he's number 2 behind Kirby Smart, but I don't think that's a conversation you can't have right now. There's still some Buckeye fans saying, yep, but dude just can't beat Michigan. Now, that's not altogether true because he has beat Michigan one time, but the point remains. Of the last 4 tries, 0-4. And that doesn't sit well with them. And I'm not telling you that it should, but I do think if you beat them this season and you put on top of that last year's national title, this past season, I think that would do a lot for the acceptance of Ryan Day at Ohio State, even with the contract extension he just got. Also, I think for Ryan Day, like the longevity for him, I'd feel a lot more confident telling you today, hey, Ryan Day is going to be at Ohio State for the next 5 years plus, 10 years plus, if they can start to beat Michigan. Because if the other thing happens, and this take is correct, and Michigan gets it done, it wouldn't be that crazy because of all that we just said, because a less talented, more gettable team beat Ohio State at their place this past season. It wouldn't be crazy. But what I think it would do is, if you're Michigan, what does the next 5 years look like for you? If this is now, the next 3 years at least with Bryce Underwood, like you feel pretty good about where you stand at that point. You probably feel pretty good about the way that you're going to continue to just provide more momentum for what that thing already is in Ann Arbor and the recruiting and the NIL and all those things. But the more interesting thing to me is the Ryan Day discussion here, because I don't think Ryan Day would get fired. I think the national title has made us all just realize dude's a good coach. But with how just ugly things get, I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Day says, you know what, no, like I'm out. I'm out. And I wouldn't fault him for that. I wouldn't be a fan of that. I don't think that's the right move if you're talking about, being the best coach for Ohio State in terms of like them asking him to leave. But I think if Ryan Day decides he wants to go after that, I don't think that's out of the question because of how intense that rivalry has been and because of the narrative around him in general and how tough a loss has made that thing. So again, not rooting for anything here in that sense, but I just think that's an interesting ripple effect to keep a pulse on if Michigan does, for the 5th year in a row, beat Ohio State. But we'll see what happens. I think that game, too, is going to have some good stakes, just so y'all are we're all dialed in together. I think that's going to be a fun game. It's always a fun game, but in terms of those past couple of seasons where they were playing essentially for the Big Ten championship, I think it might be a similar kind of intensity here for the college football public when we watch Michigan, Ohio State here going forward. Now, last team I want to talk about in the Big Ten as it is, or going from a Big Ten topic to another Big Ten topic. USC is recruiting like an absolute program right now. Now it's still very early in 2026, but they're doing some work on the trail. And it's funny because we sat down with Lincoln Riley a week ago I'll go check out that conversation on the channel if you haven't already. But we asked him, hey, what's like your philosophy in recruiting here? Like, how are you guys going about this? And he was very transparent. He's like, we get what this brand is. We get it's USC. We get the weight that we can throw around here. And it starts and ends for us in Southern California. We have to lock down this state. And you take that answer, which lip service is one thing, but to see it actually play out how it's played out for USC is another. Paired with the hiring of a Chad Bowden, the general manager, y'all, there's just a different vibe around USC recruiting. There is. For the first time in a minute, to me, they really just feel dangerous, to be honest with you. And the reason why I feel that way is it's not just the commitments, it's where the commitments are paired with like the tangible reasons as to why you can point to them committing. Like you can see the process and the results. Before you were just seeing the results and you kind of could piece together what you thought the process was. Like go back to right around, I guess it was probably a little bit past this time a year ago, but the same kind of vibe. USC has a great recruiting weekend. They get some big-time commitments, and you're saying, hey, okay, USC, they must have the NIL figured out, right? The defensive staff must be doing some good things and being able to make these pitches and landing these top kids. And that wasn't, I don't think, untrue, but it wasn't a like sustainable approach in terms of the kind of commitments you landed. Not saying that USC shouldn't recruit the Southeast. They can and they will. But last year, it just sort of had a too good to be true vibe to it. That's a very different vibe than what this is. Going back to what I just said, the reasons you point to. Yes, NIL, the ducks in a row, is what it keeps on looking like for USC. Yes, the defensive staff, but the GM and Chad Bowden feels like direction, feels like organization, feels like structure, feels like direction. All those things is what it feels like USC has now. And you're seeing it. I mean, you flip Jonas Williams from Oregon, quarterback that went out and got from the team in the Big Ten that you're trying to get through to go win the conference. Samote Katawanga, Southern California kid. Get a commitment from him. Like the bulk of this class, as it stands right now, is from Southern California. That is a much more sustainable way to recruit if you're USC than being able to land commitments from the Southeast early on and have to keep those kids committed from across the country for the duration of what? The next, I mean, we're sitting here in February, National Signing Days in December, 10 months? That's not saying you can't do it, but you feel a lot better with how this class is coming together with a lot of them being on the West Coast. So if you're a USC fan kind of feeling jaded based on last year's happenings, you're not wrong for feeling that way. But I think you look at the different details of this whole thing, and I feel a lot better about USC as it pertains to their sustainability here on the recruiting trail. Now, the thing that I love the most about USC as we talk about the recruiting with them, USC could have won, call it, let's give them a random number of wins they could have had last year. Let's say USC wins 9 games last year. So it's a good win total. But if they don't make the moves they made internally to capitalize on that, you would have, not that you wouldn't have had success, but you wouldn't have been able to max out your success on the field and take it to the recruiting trail. I feel like from USC right now, they are in a good spot to catch the wave. Like, I'm not necessarily a surfer, but I lived in Southern California for a long enough time to watch enough people do it and get a good vibe for how it works. If you're not in the right spot to catch the wave when it breaks, you're not catching the wave. You can maybe get a little bit of a current and get you closer to shore and catch the next wave, but like if USC had won 9 games last year, they wouldn't have been able to catch the wave to the degree they're catching it right now. And if USC has success on the field in 2025, that's where things really get going. That's where you got the big old tidal wave, surfs up, you throw it on the board, and like things are happening for you. That's the exciting thing for me. So I have confidence now from USC. Like in 2025, you should have success. Like Jaden Mayava, the way they're talking about him at quarterback for Lincoln Riley, I trust that. Defense keeps trending the right way. I trust that. I see no reason why they can't make noise in 2025, which would sustain the recruiting. But even further, it would bolster the recruiting, and it would cause them to ride that thing all the way to being a top-tier team in college football. That's what USC should be. I have USC bias growing up in California. I absolutely do, but that's what they should be. There's no way around it. So very curious to see how the plot thickens for them, to see where they finish in 2026. But the hot start right now, where they're getting these commitments from, the process you can point to and have confidence in if I'm a USC fan, there's a lot of reason for excitement, and I don't think that reason or that excitement is misplaced by any stretch of the imagination. So USC fans, get us on here and let us know what you think of just the momentum on the recruiting show that Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden and company have got for you out there in Los Angeles. Hey, appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. We are back on the air. Well, full hour show for you, I suppose, on Thursday. But we'll have content coming for you throughout the rest of today, the rest of tomorrow, and essentially all the time. We're talking college football. So another reason to be subscribed. Cato on the ones and on the twos, bringing you what you need most. For myself, JD PicKell, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We will keep this party rolling. We will see y'all